Hey guys, today I want to talk about values in our paintings and the way we check those values inside of Photoshop. First, I want to read what Richard Smith had to say about values in his book A la Prima. What are values? The term values refer to the range of lightness and darkness within a subject, as well as the tone from white to black in a painting. White paint is as light as we can attain in a picture. Black, or its equivalent, is the darkness. Most painters employ the familiar grouping of 9, 4 in the light, with white as the lightest, 4 in the dark to black, and 1 in between, that would be 50% gray. This is called the value scale. The trade-off of doing that is that we have so few values to work with. We must often settle for capturing the effect of light rather than attempting literal rendering. The key to do this is the use of contrast. There are many ways to check your values in Photoshop. There is the hue and saturation, this one. The other one is the black layer on top, set to color. I have also seen people using adjustment black, this one right here, this the black and white, this adjustment black and white layer. And we have to question ourselves which one is the correct way to do it. Now, the important thing to keep in mind here is that hues have a value relationship between them. Every hue have a value. If you look at this image, you will see that yellow is the lightest of all of the hues, violet being the darkest. So we have to ask ourselves which way of checking your values in Photoshop is respecting the value relationship between the hues. Is it the hue and saturation layer? Is it the black layer set to color? Or is it the black and white adjustment layer? If you see here, the worst way to do it, and I've seen this, that's why I want to talk about this, because I've seen a lot of people doing this, is that people tend to decrease the saturation of the painting. People seem to do this all the time. If we think about it, we know that yellow is the lightest one, right? What is happening to the yellows here? If you pay attention, look how the yellows in the painting looks. This is yellow. It looks 50% gray. That is not correct. You may say, well, let's use the black layer on top. The problem with that is that the black layer on top pushes the blues too dark. I will show you an example why the dark layer on top is doing this to the blues, but if you see, it is darkening a lot the blues and the reds too. Now this one, the black and white adjustment layer is very similar to the hue and saturation. I'm going to toggle on and off the difference between each one, and you will see that there's a huge difference. You see there, it is really huge. This one is subtle. The hue and saturation is subtle compared to the black and white adjustment, but it is still there, the difference. So if value is so important, we have to pay attention to the correct way to do it. So none of this way seems to work. What is the correct way? There is another way, a correct way to check your values. The way to do this is that we have to go to View, Proof Setup, Set Custom, and here in Proof Conditions, Device to Simulate, you have to select dot grain 20%. I learned this from Thomas Scholes. He have a very nice article on his website about explaining why this is important, and so if you want to check the article, I will link to it in my description so you can read it. Here is a test that I did. So if you see here, we have the color wheel right here. If we, let's say the worst one will be the saturated image, you will see that the value relationship between the hues is totally lost. We see a uniform incorrect values. If we use the black layer on top, we see that the blues are very dark compared to the correct one, that will be the dot gain 20%. If we see here, the red and the blues are categorized as high dark, but This the black layer on top is too dark. It's pushing it almost too low dark to the violets, right? So if we check the black and white adjustment layer, we see that in this case now the blues are still a little bit dark, and they tend to push the magenta too much. You see the lightning here. Also the magenta is lighter than the yellow. That doesn't make sense. So the correct way to do this is to using the dot gain 20%. If we see here, we see the yellow, the greens, orange, yellow, orange will be right here. We see this makes sense. This is totally representative of this graph. Something really cool about this is that we can use once we set off the custom the dot gain 20%, we can create this shortcut. So we can, in my case, I just press F1 and I check my values correctly. You see here, just look at the difference. Look at what happens if I use the hue and saturation. You will see, oh my god, there is a huge difference. If you are trying to judge your values, you will make a mistake if you are doing this with this method. Using the black layer on top is the second best, but it still have a huge effect on yellow. The yellow is not that bright, and this one doesn't make sense either. The magentas, for this one the magentas highlighted, so it doesn't make sense. I have another painting here. So in this case there's not like a huge difference because I'm not using a lot of saturated colors, but the same case applies. This one, as I say, this one is very subtle, but I'm pressing F1 and seeing the dot gain 20%. This is the correct values. If we go to hue and saturation, you will see the difference in the values. If we go to black and white, there's a slight difference again because this one doesn't have two saturated colors. There's a slight difference you see in the foreground. Black and white, there is still a difference over here. Yeah, that was my little rant about checking your values inside of Photoshop. I wanted to make this video for a long time, and I finally did it. Yeah, boy. As you guys notice, I changed the name of the YouTube channel, and now it's called Story Painting. Story painting, I like storytelling, but story painting, you know, I like the name. I think that it is a better YouTube channel name. I think that is easier to remember, and I hope you guys like it. Let me know in the comments if you guys like it. Let me know in the comments what technique have you been using to check your values. So, alright, that's it. Bye bye. Thanks for watching.